What is redemption? Is it possible that a person who killed another human being redeemable? How do one find redemption sitting inside of a prison cell serving a life sentence? How do he find redemption? When inside this environment it represents hopelessness, despair, dejection, trauma, pain, grief, guilt. How do one find this? And these are some of the questions I had at 19 years old when I was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. I walked out of the courtroom into a prison cell with these questions still unanswered for many years. I was taught everything I was taught how to survive in prison. I was taught how to create a prison knife. I was taught how to protect myself in the shower with a knife as I wash part of my body, and I'm holding a 6 to 7 inch blade in my hand to protect myself just in case someone runs into the shower on me. I was taught how to jam my door to protect myself at night when I sleep so that no one come into my room while I'm sleeping and stab me. I was taught the do's and do nots of, convict code in prison. I was taught by the prison staff all of the rules and regulations that I must adhere to unless I would be placed on segregation, locked up, on another place in prison called lockup. I was taught all of these things. But the question that resonated with me from the day I was sentenced to many years while I was in prison is, what is redemption? That I've been sent to prison for a crime that I committed, and it was part of my debt. But was it possible for me to find redemption in this environment? When the conversation is not about redemption, it's full of anger, full of loss. So how did I find redemption? And this is where my story begins. I was forced to seek the answer to these questions that I pose to you all. What is redemption? I remember reading a book by Mahatma Gandhi, and it says that no human being is bad enough to be beyond redemption. That spoke volumes to me because it let me know that redemption is possible. But still, I needed to find the steps to redemption. I wanted to understand what placed me in a situation where I made a choice to pull the trigger to take another human being's life. What went into that thinking that led to that situation? Because inside of the prison environment, I saw very similar people who looked like me, who were charged with very similar crimes as me, murder. So I was always curious to know what was my thought process, what was his thought process, and how we are sitting inside of this prison, how each of us are going to find redemption inside of prison. I found something. Serving life, it causes you to think differently. And for me, my thought process is that I needed to do something different with my life. That my life sentence, my murder conviction, it was a wake-up call for me. And I knew that I was not able to bring my victims back, but I knew I had to do something to honor my victim. I remember one night, many years into my incarceration, I remember one night I was on this quest, continuously through praying and seeking forgiveness. That I remember one night I found myself inside of my prison cell in a fetus position, crying uncontrollably, full of sorrow, full of guilt, full of remorse, confused, because I was not prepared. No one told me that you're going to be in prison for a period of time. The longer you sit in prison, the reality is that these emotions that you bury deep inside of you, like so many people in prison, we bury these feelings of guilt for the crime that we committed. We bury them deep inside of us because it's too difficult to deal with at times. But for me, I allowed those emotions to surge back up, which as I said, I found myself in a fetus position. And I remember laying on that floor inside of my prison cell, uncontrollably crying and full of grief and and all the guilt was washing over my body that night. And I remember I just started calling out my victim's name. And for so many years inside of my prison environment, during my prison sentence, I never would acknowledge my victim. I would never give him his name. I would never give honor to his name. I would always refer to him as him. But this particular night in this cell, I remember laying on that floor, and I remember calling his name out for the first time in almost 5 years of me being sentenced to life in prison. And I begged him at that moment. I called his name, Gary. Gary, will you forgive me? Please help me find redemption in a way that I can continue to honor you in this moment. And I remember it's like a heavy spirit came over me that night. And this is where I began to communicate with Gary's spirit. And I remember making a promise to him that this night, going forward, I would continue my path to redemption. And that path to redemption would be in a manner that will honor him. So I began that night, I got myself up and I began the process of searching for redemption. And this is where I discovered the 5 stages of incarceration that saved my life, that placed me on the path to redemption. And from there created these curriculums to help other men inside of the prison find redemption. And I wish there was a time that when I first entered into prison, that someone would have given me this information, which I began departing to other men inside of prison and watching them embark upon the path to redemption. What are those 5 things? Every man goes to prison. Every individual goes to prison. They go into prison in the stage of denial. I realized that self-denial is one of the first things that most individuals who are incarcerated deal with. Denial. Denial about the impact of their crime. When you're in denial about the impact of your crime, you're in denial about the things that affected you, that led up to your crime, whether that's sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, abandonment, whatever, grief, whatever that issue is that you're in denial about. That prevents you from moving forward in your life. And for many years, the first few years of my life, I was not able to go forward because I was in denial about a lot of things in my life. And I realized that self-denial is one of the first stages of one's incarceration because that is the way we survive. We don't want to acknowledge it, so we bury it. So the second stage was anger. I realized that in order for me to be on this path to redemption, I needed to process my anger. Because I realized after being sentenced to life in prison, I wasn't full of remorse. I was full of anger and indignation versus remorse for my crime. But I realized that what it was because it was connected to some of the things I was in denial about that I didn't want to acknowledge. I wanted to blame it. I wanted to blame my problems on everyone else except acknowledging the pain that I've caused to others, which only caused me to be more angry and bitter and cold-hearted, no remorse. Which leads me to the third stage of my incarceration was victimization. Inside of the prison environment, I know it was a very common cater to hear individuals speak about, how they were the victims, even though they were in there for violent crimes, that they were the victim, and they never spoke about empathy, remorse, guilt, ownership for their crimes. It was always a matter of blaming someone else. So I realized that inside of that prison environment, in order for me to begin this path to redemption, I needed to address 3 areas of my life. I needed to take the time to do self-reflection about the areas that I'm in denial about. What are those core things that I'm in self-denial about that I have created to place a barrier around me? I had to acknowledge that why am I so angry and bitter? Because I'm really not the victim. I took a human being life, so why am I angry? And I realized that my anger was rooted in the things that I was in denial about. Because I didn't want to address those areas, it caused me to be angry. And then it turned into me taking on a victim's mentality, like I was the victim. So I was not able to see the pain of the loss of someone else because I saw myself as the victim versus seeing the real victims, which is Gary's family. And I was stuck in this cycle for many years of my incarceration. And I realized that the only way I can find redemption is that I had to break away from these 3 stages of incarceration and move into the last 2 stages of incarceration. The most powerful thing that I discovered inside of prison, and I saw it not only work in my life and manifested in my life, but I saw it manifested in all of the other men that I taught, is the power of forgiveness. The power of forgiveness transforms people. When you know and understand that redemption is possible, when you know and understand that you're redeemable in spite of your mistake, in spite of how violent your crime is, redemption is possible. Here I was sitting in prison for murder, but I found hope. I found strength. I found purpose inside of prison. And that purpose was to use my story, use what I learned and what I call the 5 stages of incarceration to help empower other men. It's so unfortunate that inside of prison, men and women are not given tools to find redemption. We're placed inside of a prison cell, sometimes 23 hours in one. Sometimes we're just locked in a cell. And these questions, we ponder these questions. But sometimes these questions become so heavy that it causes us to act out in a violent way. Because when you tell a person there's no hope, when you tell a person that there's no redemption, a person start acting out in a hopeless manner. So my 5 stages of incarceration was all about helping me find hope, which gave me life, connected me to a purpose. And when we give people these things inside of prison, other than just giving them a prison sentence and a prison number, but we give them hope, we show them the path to redemption, we create better people. Because it is said 85% of those who are incarcerated will one day be free. So if they return back to the community without an understanding of redemption, the chances are they may commit another crime. And I'm a perfect example of when a person finds redemption in prison, he can return back into the community and be an asset to the community. He is an asset to the prison environment. He's an asset to the young people in the community because now he understands what empathy is. He understands what pain is. He understands what grief is, especially when you live with the spirit of another human being attached to you because you committed a violent crime against them. So my thing is, and I call you all to action, let's speak more hope into the lives of those who are incarcerated. Let's help them understand what their 5 stages of incarceration is before they're released from prison. Let's help them the day of their sentence understand that redemption. Let's help them get a clear path to redemption. Just as the same as we give them manuals of how to survive in prison, let's give them manuals and books and information in how to find redemption. The 5 stages of incarceration, understanding what your areas of denial is, understanding what your areas of anger is, understanding that you are not a victim, helping you build empathy, helping you understand the power of forgiveness, forgiveness from God, forgiveness of self, forgiving those who have harmed you, and also making amends to those you have harmed. It transforms your life. It transforms your heart. It transforms your mind. And it creates a safer environment inside of prison and produce better people as they return back home to the community. So my challenge is redemption is possible, but we have to teach people how to obtain redemption inside of a prison. Thank you all.